But it's not just Barbados that's moving closer to China, it's the whole of the Caribbean. I mean,
it's the whole
investment
world.
from China has gone up many folds.
But so is the whole world. If I look correctly, I think the Chinese hold a large percentage of assets within the United States of America and a large amount of their treasuries as well. So for you to focus on the Caribbean or Africa with China without recognizing the role that China is playing in Europe or in the North Atlantic countries is a bit disingenuous and really reflects more that we are seen as pawns, regrettably, rather than countries with equal capacity to determine our destiny and to be part and parcel of that global conversation to fight the global issues of the day like climate and the pandemic.
All right. Well,
the elephant in the room, what a lot of Western climate diplomats tell me is that leaders like yourself also carry a responsibility. Why are vulnerable countries still so debt-stricken? Why is there still corruption? What is your response to that?
You really want me to answer you?
I do.
Okay. Why is it that every time we talk about countries from the South, the first allegation is corruption? Last time I checked, in the USA and the UK and Europe, they're riddled with corruption, but nobody says that they're not capable of achieving their objectives because of corruption. Why is it that we're not talking about the fact that these countries became independent, having allowed those countries that colonized them to extract significant portions of their wealth, such that we had no proper housing, no proper education, no proper healthcare systems, no proper legal systems, no proper go across the whole strip, and certainly nothing to do with building social capital like community development and cultural enterprises.
Hello guys, welcome back to today's video. It's Joel Mugisha here, and guys, on today's episode we're gonna be covering the Prime Minister of Barbados, Her Excellency Mia Mottley, one of the best orators out there in the political world. She's a very smart and intelligent lady, and we're gonna look at how she handles, the West and reporters in matters concerning the Caribbean, and in matters concerning their relations with China, in matters concerning with reparations, and also in matters concerning with some of the islands, nations in the Caribbean becoming their own republic state, because many of them are still under the British monarchy. They are still under the king. So guys, kindly do me a favor, subscribe, like this video, share, and drop a comment. YouTube still shows me and tells me that many of you are watching these videos without subscribing. So guys, let's jump into today's video, and then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna give my commentary.
7 military US bases are here in the Caribbean, but people are beginning to wonder whether you're looking further east. And we had a question on social media, Prime Minister, which says, I honestly would like to know why we in Barbados are so ingratiated with China. Why are we in so deep with China? So are you swapping one superpower for another?
Well, once again, I regret that the person who asked the question doesn't know our history. In 1977, Barbados established relations with the People's Republic of China. This is 44 years ago, and therefore to suggest that we are now seeking to ingratiate ourselves with China means that you don't understand where we've come from or what we're doing. Any country that lives in this world today, to exist in this world, ought to have relations with every country. And China is clearly a global power. And for us not to have a relationship with China, even if we didn't have one 47 years ago, would be foolish.
But you've been very complimentary about China. You had a phone conversation with President Xi Jinping recently. You said this is all about strengthening the relationship with China. In 2019, the government signed up to the BRI, the big infrastructure projects and so on. And some people are suspicious. They think that China wants to buy the family silver.
But let's put it this way. They've also been very complimentary of the Americans and the British and the Canadians, so that for me not to be complimentary of China seems unusual. And similarly, for persons who believe that because we want to be friendly with China means that we are a pawn, tells us what they think about us in the first place, because we are capable of being, as our first Prime Minister said, friends of all and satellites of men.
But it's not just Barbados that's moving closer to
No.
China, it's the whole of the Caribbean. I mean,
It's the whole
investment
world.
from China has gone up many folds
But so
in
is
the
the
last
whole
few
world.
years.
If I look correctly, I think the Chinese hold a large percentage of assets within the United States of America and a large amount of their treasuries as well. So for you to focus on the Caribbean or Africa with China without recognizing the role that China is playing in Europe or in the North Atlantic countries is a bit disingenuous and really reflects more that we are seen as pawns, regrettably, rather than countries with equal capacity to determine our destiny and to be part and parcel of that global conversation to fight the global issues of the day like climate and the pandemic.
All right, well, that's put me in my place, hasn't
No,
it?
not at
Prime
all,
Minister
Zara.
Mia Mottley. Thank you.
The elephant in the room, what a lot of Western climate diplomats tell me is that leaders like yourself also carry a responsibility. Why are vulnerable countries still so debt-stricken? Why is there still corruption? What is your response to that?
You really want me to answer you?
I do.
Okay. Why is it that every time we talk about countries from the South, the first allegation is corruption? Last time I checked, in the USA and the UK and Europe, they're riddled with corruption, but nobody says that they're not capable of achieving their objectives because of corruption. Why is it that we're not talking about the fact that these countries became independent, having allowed those countries that colonized them to extract significant portions of their wealth, such that we had no proper housing, no proper education, no proper healthcare systems, no proper legal systems, no proper go across the whole strip, and certainly nothing to do with building social capital like community development and cultural enterprises.
Madam Prime Minister, what is Barbados hoping to achieve when it becomes a republic?
To be able to settle for our citizens once and for all that they do not and will not be inferior to anyone on this earth. We have for too long had to accept the fact that a head of state of this country is somebody who we don't choose. We have no say in how they're appointed, and it causes us to feel, in many instances, that there are two sets of people. We hope to bring this to an end, and we hope that it will give the confidence and the sense of high self-esteem that our citizens need in order to be able to be more productive and in order to be able to chart our own destiny. When you look at our history and how we got here, then you realize that having a head of state who is a non-Barbadian is an anachronism that this country can no longer afford to carry. And secondly, that we use this opportunity to be able to set the tone and to create the framework for establishing once and for all who we want to be and what we want to stand for. And that requires, in my view, not just form, but substance. And to that extent, therefore, we're not only changing the head of state, we hope to be able to start a discussion for a new constitution, but a new constitution that looks at the different roles, responsibilities, and indeed rights of citizens. But before you even get there, I think we need to settle a document that says, look, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. And on our own journey here as a government, we did something similar in 2016 with a Covenant of Hope. We want to be able to let people know that nation building is not a passive act. It is very much an active entity. And if it is active, then we need to know who we are and what we stand for.
All right. But you know, Mia Mottley, there are those in Barbados who say, look, the Queen's a very benign presence. Mm-hmm. And secondly, you've just decided to do this. You haven't put this to a referendum.
Well, first of all, anyone who tells you that doesn't know the history of this country. We have been discussing a republic now since the late 1990s, and the 1998 Constitutional Reform Commission that was led by Sir Henry Ford and was a broad civil society and across all political parties recommended yet again that this is the direction in which we go. I was Attorney General when we looked at the issue of a referendum. And then all political parties and all other elements of civil society have more or less in the last 20 years said, this is a time that has come and that we don't need any more discussion. And let me be very clear, Our determination that we want to be the best that we can be is not a reflection to denigrate anyone. And we have utmost respect for the royal family, utmost respect for Her Majesty, utmost respect for Prince Charles, who is a great friend of Barbados. But equally, we have utmost love for our people and ourselves. And when we look into the mirror, the image that we need to see is somebody who is capable of being able of rising to the top of this country's offices, and as a non-executive president, capable of reflecting the best of who we are and understanding what we face every day.
Prime Minister, you've added your voice to the global discussion on reparations. We could agree that reparations are due to African descendants and to their nation states. How do you view what mechanisms should be used in handling the issue of reparations? Well,
let us start from the perspective that reparations for us is not a Barbadian issue alone. This is a CARICOM issue, and there's a 10-point CARICOM plan. Barbados, and I at this moment happen to be the Prime Minister, has responsibility, lead responsibility for reparations in CARICOM. I'm not surprised, because we were that country where the modern expression of racism took form, regrettably, in the 17th century and in the 18th century.
Because Barbados was the first British slave society.
And a lot of the laws and a lot of the iniquitous practices came out of in here. And that's why you've heard me say that while our Parliament has had unbroken service, that we have both seen it as an instrument of oppression, but it is now a tool of empowerment in the last 80 or so years. So we start from that perspective. Reparations for us is a development issue, and it is one we believe whose time has come. 20 years ago, when we first started having this discussion, people would laugh us out of the room. When emancipation came, there was a compensation of slave owners of £20 million. We ask ourselves today, when these countries became independent, what was the development compact given to us? We got no development compact to help us with housing or education or health, but all of the wealth that was extracted from these countries for centuries were used to build the monumental edifices that we see all across Europe and North America.
When the British were asked for compensation, like the slave owners were, they were told, your freedom is your compensation.
And that once again is an offhand comment that causes us to feel that you think we're pawns and not human beings. And we say simply, look, we're not seeking to do anything that is unusual, but we believe that our people have a right to development. And therefore we feel that there is need for a conversation, particularly for the developing countries of the world who were made victims for centuries of the extraction of wealth on a continuous basis.
So some people do say the Caribbean as a region perhaps is lacking in inclusive rights for all groups
I'm not so
society.
sure, and I think that the world has to begin to also have some cultural discussions, because democracy doesn't only come in one flavor. It may have universal values, but the same way my accent is different from yours and it's different from his, that the world does admit of diversity, and we have to have sensible, mature conversations that can't be reduced to 60-second song bites or to headlines, and that's where I think the world is missing that kind of mature discussion, and certainly does not see small island states, regrettably.
I asked myself on Monday night, as we met to determine the halfway point of the SDG goals, how many roads we have to walk just to make it to the door, only to be told that the door is closed. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Rocky Dawuni, a famous reggae artist from Ghana, nominated for awards multiple times. But his words ring because in a very real sense, are we going to trod the roads only to be told that it's too late? Too late for us to save as many as we can from the climate crisis. Too late for us to save as many as we can from the conflicts of war. Too late for us to be able to provide the food that so many need, as we reflect on the fact that more people are likely to be hungry in this world in 2030 than in 2015, or as we get to the basic numbers that 735 million people suffered chronic hunger last year at a time when so many others had so much to throw away. and to use? Are we going to be too late for the SDGs that are really the promise of development and the promise of the conferral of dignity on our people? We have today to determine what is the will of this body comprised of the member states to make the fundamental governance changes that will deliver in the third decade of the 21st century. Our world, as you know, is replete with issues. And I don't need to stand here and recount them in detail, for you have heard them in almost every speech delivered from this podium. But what is the issue is whether we can summon the determination that is required of us to make the changes that are appropriate to the age in which we live. Our democracy cannot survive if we do not have the same facts. But yet we live in a world where the generation of fake news is almost a daily occurrence, and where people act on those premises without consideration for whether the news is true or not.
So guys, you had those powerful from Prime Minister of Barbados, Mottley. This woman is actually a definition of woman empowerment, because she's one of the best orators out there in the political world, because the way she delivers her speeches, she's very wise, guys. And as you have heard, guys, she is defending the Caribbean of their relationship with China. As you can see, the reporter is trying to, instigate that working with China is a bad thing. Yet the West depends on China. The whole world depends on China. The United States and the West cannot actually function without the Chinese economy. If the Chinese economy goes down, the whole global economy shakes. And as much as the West can work with China, it's the same way even developing countries, like countries in the Caribbean, like Jamaica, the Barbados, and the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago. Many of these South American countries, including African countries, have the right to work with China. And another thing, everybody has the right to partner with any whom that they want, because you cannot only partner with one person. Every country has the right, and it has the independence to partner with whomever they want, as long as it benefits their citizens, as long as it benefits their country. So working with China is actually, she defends that not being a bad thing. It's a good thing for the economies of developing countries. When the Western countries were in these countries, they were looting, they were exploiting, but China brings something to the table. China comes and builds infrastructure projects, and it's a win-win situation with China most of the time. But most of the time with Western countries, it's one-sided situation. Even asking loans from these corporations like IMF and the World Bank, it's always high interest on African countries, high interest on small island countries like the Barbados, Jamaica, and the rest, guys. Another thing that she talks about corruption. When it comes to these developing countries, many of the time they want to poke a finger at corruption. Yet even Western countries have corruption, guys, but yet they can function and nobody questions what they can do. So nobody should question these island countries. Doesn't mean that, guys, we cannot fight corruption or corruption is a good thing, but it's actually, as she has said, very many people in the West thinks like these countries in the Caribbean are pawns and they have nothing to offer. They have no say of themselves. Guys, another thing that she says is reparations. When after World War II happened, the world came together to rebuild Germany. After the Holocaust, the world came together to rebuild Israel. But after slavery and exploitation for centuries of wealth and minerals of African and Caribbean countries, there have been no reparations that have been done to these countries. You know, as actually the reporter was saying, you know, jokingly, the British said your freedom is your reparation, your freedom is your compensation. But in real sense, guys, she's also still fighting for the Barbados and many island nations in the Caribbean to become their own republic. If you guys did not know, many of these island countries in the Caribbean, they are not republic actually. They are under the Queen. They are under the King, actually, the King of Britain. So all they can have is a prime minister. They don't have the final say. They don't have, you know, autonomy in their politics because they are not fully functioning states and republic. And she is fighting for the Barbados to actually become a republic. So this is some of the things that are affecting these countries in the Caribbean, like the Barbados, Jamaica, and many others, like, you know, the Bahamas, and so on and so forth. Guys, tell me in the comment section what you think of Mia Mottley's speech and how she has handled these questions from these reporters. And also let me know, guys, of your own opinion of today's video, guys. It's been Joel Mugisha here. Thank you very much for watching this far. Kindly do me a favor, if you're not subscribed, subscribe, like this video, share, drop a comment, and as always, guys, see you on the next one.